So in the previous unit, we talked about parent functions and how we could predict the way a function is going to look based off of, different transformations. This one is pretty clearly a square function or a parabola. And parabolas we tend to study quite a bit because they have a ton of like physics applications, that kind of stuff. Now, one thing I'll note is we do know the vertex of our parent function here is just 0, 0. All of our parent functions start at the origin. And based off of what we learned in the last unit, we know that this has a horizontal shift of h. So in other words, I'm going to add h there, and a vertical shift of k. So I'm going to add k. And so our vertex for this vertex form is just going to be hk. Now, we'll talk about how we can kind of get there if it's not in vertex form and a lot of other things, but I'm just kind of introing the basics of this form for now. Now, one of the most important things that we're going to work with in this particular function is this a value here. And to kind of really get at the a value, let's go ahead and talk about the fact that as x approaches infinity or negative infinity, so as x gets really big or really negative, this k value here shouldn't really matter because, again, k is a constant, so it's going to stay at a certain level. And eventually, this piece right here is going to get real big or real small, okay? Real positive or real negative. So let's kind of look at that. So we've got y is equal to a times, and we know that x minus h squared is always going to be times a positive number. Well, that leads us to some interesting results or some predictions that we can make. Okay, so basically we have two cases here. We have the case where our a value here is going to be greater than 0 or positive, in which case we are going to have that y equal to a positive times a positive, which means all of our y values will be positive. Now, let's think about that in terms of direction. Again, we have our y-axis and our x-axis here. What that's saying is that y is going to become more and more positive as x gets kind of goes towards its ends, as it approaches either positive or negative infinity. Well, that's pretty cool. Hopefully you can guess what the other case would be. If a is less than 0, then we're going to have that y is equal to a negative times a positive, or that y is just equal to a negative. So what we're saying there is that if this a value is negative, then as x gets really negative, so will y. And as x gets really positive, so will y. I'm sorry, as x gets really positive, x will get more negative. So the basic idea here, and I kind of wrote this out twice, but is that based off of our a value here, we can predict whether or not our graph is going to go up or down. And then we can also easily identify our vertex in this form, which should make a lot of sense considering this is called vertex form. We'll talk more about kind of what to do if it's not in this form already and whether or not we really need to get it in this form in the next videos. But hopefully this gives you a nice introduction to one of the easier ways to write a parabola if we have the intention of looking at its graph and how it will behave.